So anyway, good evening. Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Jacqueline King, and I have the lovely Dottie Davis with me tonight. Tonight is going to be an amazing show. So I need you to come in and tell us where you're coming from. And if you have questions, you can type them on the screen. But we have a really tough topic, but one that needs to be discussed. So, Dottie, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell them what you do.
Sure. My name's Dottie Davis. I am a retired law enforcement officer. I served 32 years in policing and was lucky enough to rise through the ranks from patrol officer to sergeant to lieutenant to captain, and then finally third in command of the agency as a deputy chief. I retired for 2 days. I don't do retirement well. I don't like to sit idly by. And then I became the director of security for the largest corporation in the state of Indiana. And then I formed my own company and I do consulting around the world. A lot of training, specifically training to prevent violence in communities.
And that is so needed. But Dottie, uh, I found that when COVID hit, and that's what I heard, domestic violence went up a lot. And that is that because people were locked in and just tired of each other? What do you say on that?
Yeah, there were a lot of dynamics that drove our domestic violence homicides here in our state. In Indiana alone, in that 1 year time frame, our domestic violence homicides rose by 181%. And what people didn't understand is that not only was isolation a factor, but if you think about protective factors such as being able to go to work and having someone there recognize that you're in distress, or have someone recognize an injury or a pattern of behavior, being late for coming to work or calling off sick on Mondays because you have an injury that's apparent. None of that was happening because people were stuck in the home. And then the children were stuck there too. So we had 12 children in our state die in those domestic violence
Wow.
households as well during that 1 year time frame. Kids go to school. That's their protective factor because they have a school nurse, they have a school counselor, maybe an athletic director or coach who's seeing them and seeing how they're behaving either aggressively or they're isolative. So that was a problem. And then we also know that drug and alcohol use and
Hmm.
pornography use increased exponentially during that time frame. So there were a multitude of factors where if a household is already predisposed to violence, now
Hmm.
we add in these life stressors and it's just a powder keg waiting to explode.
Oh, wow. So one of the things that I talk about a lot is why do women stay in these situations? I know there's sometimes it's financial, but some women just he loves me. I just know he loves me. I don't get it.
So there's a lot of factors why women stay. And I'd just like to turn that question a little bit because we always ask why does the victim stay instead of asking why is the abuser using violence toward a person that they profess to love, that they
Okay.
have children with, and it's a matter of choice. They choose to do it because they have the ability to have power and control over people in the household. Women will stay, people will stay in an intimate relationship when there's violence because of a lot of factors. One, there's the constraints of marriage. One, if you were born and raised in a household where, your parents stayed married regardless of how bad it was, the vows of marriage say to love and honor till death do us part. When I got remarried, I changed those vows, just so you know.
So
Uh,
you got to elaborate on that one, but
I
go
took out
ahead.
the word obey. I'm like, I'm not a dog. I don't have to obey
Okay.
anyone. So that was one of my vows that I said, nope, that's something I can't live with. But people will also stay because of children. And I know that sounds hard to understand, but if you believe in a two-parent household, then you think it's better for that other partner to be in the house, even with the violence. And somehow you own it and say, well, if only I didn't do this, if only I didn't do that. And you make a really long list of things that you think you can do to prevent that violence or avoid it. And in fact, you can't, because you don't control it. The abuser controls and chooses whether or not to use violence. And so it's a moving target constantly. So for me, I did leave because of my daughter, but other people will stay because of the children. And then let's just talk about debt. You know, when men are still making, in Allen County, in this county, we're 67 cents for what men are making. So for the same job. So that's just, it shows you that there's a disparity there. And there are a lot of factors why women may not be able to leave. And then let's talk about lack of resources. You know, Allen County is pretty rich in resources, in my opinion, because I travel all around, and some of the rural areas that I work in, it's a long distance, but our shelter here serves 6 counties. Well, if you have to travel 50 miles to get to shelter, is that really a viable resource?
Right.
And it really isn't, because if you don't have transportation or your kids can't get to their school, those are prohibiting factors for just leaving. And then the other thing I want to say is, when the victim leaves the relationship, they're at a 75% higher rate of homicide than if they stay. Because leaving is, can I just say, it's a crapshoot? You don't know what's going to happen, but we know that stalking increases, and we know that firearm use increases once the victim has tried to leave the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know a young lady that left. This was she. I went to school with her, and she left, and he came back and killed her. So I know firsthand. But now, so what kind of support is Allen County or around the country are women getting? Because when I was in Greensboro, we got a call, um, my nonprofit, that it was a girl that couldn't find, all the shelters were full. They
Mhm.
could, I mean, there's just not enough.
Well, as a matter of fact, we have 92 counties in our state, and we have less than 30 residential shelters across our
Wow.
state. So what we're seeing is that the number one reason why victims will stay is because they can't find safe, affordable housing. So it's not even just affordable. Is it safe? If they're trading one kind of violence for shots fired and open air drug dealing, that's not any safer than where they are. And so we have to be creative and figure that out. And then what we're seeing is that because we don't have enough shelters, we're creating what we call mobile advocacy. So advocates from these locations, from residential and non-residential programs, are traveling to meet the victim where they are. Well, again, that costs money to fund that. And we saw federal dollars being cut for that type
Mm-hmm.
of service across
Right.
the country. And so resources are definitely something that it's a moving target. We're constantly trying to figure out, how do we do more with less? Because the number of people we are serving is continuing to grow, but the resources are not.
Okay, well, let's get into the book. Okay, first of all, what's the name of the book?
So the name of the book is Strangled: A Survivor's Plea to Men Who Look the Other Way. The book was written for men. And with the topic, people are like, what? Why would you write the book for men? And the reason being is that domestic violence is increasing around the nation. It used to be 1 out of every 8 women living with a man would be a victim of domestic violence at some point in their lifetime. And now it's 1 out of every 4
Oh.
nationally. Here in our county, it's 1 out of every 2. And so
Mm.
our numbers have gotten so much worse. And I've been doing this work since the 1990s. Some people listening probably weren't even born yet. And our numbers haven't changed, other than, I mean, they haven't gotten lower, they've gotten greater. And so we need men standing up. If we look at those numbers, we're saying that 75% of men are good men who are respectful and honorable, toward their intimate partner. Well, we need them to stand up and tell other men it's not okay. We need them to hold other men accountable when they're objectifying women or when they're putting hands on somebody that they have no right to do so. We need people saying, hey, hold up. We need men raising good boys who understand what healthy relationships are. And so the book was written to draw the attention to men that, look, here were so many opportunities in my lifetime where men stood by and did nothing. They turned a blind eye to what was happening. And so the culture being toxic and our environment of how girls are lesser valued than boys, we have to have that conversation with men who are willing to change these numbers.
Yeah, that's a tall mountain right there.
It is, but I'm going to climb that mountain,
I know
okay?
that's right. So what is your experience that you feel that you can get this message out?
Well, I think with my law enforcement background, that gives me a little bit of credibility about what's actually happening in our homes across the nation. Having boots on the ground experience working with survivors all across this country and in other countries around us. And then I'm also a survivor, and that's why the title of the book, is a survivor's plea. I was almost killed in full police uniform by a bad guy. And people are imagining what that bad guy looked like. Well, that bad guy was the father of my child. He was my husband, and he was also a police officer. And so I want to bring attention to the fact that our abusers come in all walks of life. They come with all kinds of credentials, with all kinds of degrees, with a wide variety of affluence or poverty. They are across the spectrum. And so I want to bring light to things that people can look for. I want to talk about surviving, and I'm not that person that I was when I experienced that. I don't act anything like that anymore. My boundaries are very, very clear. And I want other survivors who pick up that book to know that there's hope for them, that they too can move to a level of survivorship and feel as though they are contributing and that they are in control of their own life, their own destiny, that it's not held any longer. I've taken my power back, and I want survivors who are like me to know that they can too.
You said something interesting. You're not that person. What made you change, and what was that person like? Were you submissive? Uh,
So I was born in a household where boys and girls had different values. I was told that girls should be seen and not heard.
mm,
And my father was, I will just say, he was sexist, he was homophobic, he was racist,
mm.
everything I do not stand for today. And so I was raised to believe I could be a mother, I could be a nurse, I could be a teacher. Those were the things that I was told I could be. And I may look feminine, but I'm really pretty much a tomboy at heart. I love the outdoors. I love athletic activities. And so when I decided to join law enforcement, my father's first question was, are you a lesbian? Like that was the
Oh,
only women that could join law enforcement. And I said, I'm not even sure why you're asking that, but the answer is no. And if I were, you know, what? And so I joined law enforcement for a lot of reasons. One, it was almost as though I was telling my father that I could be who I wanted to be. But then I entered into an environment, if you can only think about what law enforcement was like in the 1980s, there were only 5 women on our police department at the time.
hmm.
And women had only been
Is
writing,
that here, Donnie?
yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay.
Women had only been riding in police cars since 1976 in our nation. And the first city ever was Indianapolis, Indiana. So as backwards as I think our state is sometimes, we led the nation with women in police cars for the first time.
Wow.
So the culture was, it was almost like, if I can use this analogy, like I was a test tube baby. Let's see if they could survive in this environment. Let's push them to their max. Let's stress them as much as we can. And in the book, I talk about the culture of men putting hands on you. And I'm talking about your fellow officers that you work with putting hands on you, and you not having any right to tell them to stop
Wow.
or to tell them that that's harassment. You can't do that. And so the culture was really, really poor for women. And that's one of the reasons why today, across the nation, we still are having a hard time, not just recruiting women, but keeping women, retaining women in the ranks, because the culture hasn't shifted very much.
That's interesting because in Greensboro, I was on the police community review board. I was actually the vice chair. And so I did ride-alongs and stuff like that. So I know what you're saying, and I had a couple of women that I rode along with, and kind of picked their brains. So I know that what you're saying is absolutely the
Mhm.
truth. Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you shifted. What made you shift after being in abuse? You just had enough? What?
No, not at all. Because I didn't know what was happening. I thought it was my fault. If I was just,
Mm,
if only I'd watched my mouth, if only I hadn't had to work overtime, if I didn't have to ride with that other officer that my spouse felt as though was a threat. There were so many things, and I was owning it like it was all my fault. And if only I could fix that, I thought he would be happy.
mm,
So I changed who I was, and I really lost my social contacts. I lost the contact even with my family. I was prohibited from going to some family events. If he didn't want to go, I certainly wasn't going to go. But I had this, I call her my guardian angel. She was a female sergeant on the police department who named it and basically said, and I'm just going to quote her, and I did in the book. She said, I think you're pissing away your career over a man, and I'm not going to have it. And so she ordered me to counseling. And I was so angry. I can't tell you how angry I was, because I was like, look, I'm not the one who's doing the hitting. Somebody needs to tell him to take his hands off me. And her response was, he doesn't work for us, but you do. And I'm going to try to save your job. And so her ordering me to counseling at a location here in our town, that was how I learned that I was a victim of domestic violence, and that if I didn't leave the relationship, he was going to end up killing me. And
wow.
so that counseling, walking in and seeing other women who were telling the same story at a different location, it was what I needed to hear. And so years of working through how I got there. I actually have a presentation that I do that says, I know how I got here and I'm never going back,
I love
because
it.
it takes a while to figure out. I was 42 before I figured out what a healthy relationship was. That is sad. That is sad.
So, I actually kind of just stumbled onto narcissism. I probably knew it, but I didn't until I actually met someone who was.
Mhm.
Uh, in most cases, that's what you're dealing with too, right?
Well, that has become an excuse for abusers' behavior.
Okay.
A lot of people have put that label on, or they'll say they suffer from anxiety or depression. And the fact of the matter is, very few abusers have a diagnosable mental illness. They don't. It's a matter of choice. They probably have what we call learned behavior. They grew up in a household where they witnessed this. They believe this is the norm. They believe they should have the ability to be the king of the castle and to control their household and all the people within. But it's still a matter of choice. If you think about the vast majority of our domestic violence offenses don't happen in public. They happen
Right.
behind closed doors in a private home because they believe no one has the authority to tell them they can't do anything in their own home. And so while some may have some tendencies toward narcissism, the fact is that most of them have a learned behavior that they got it
Was
from their family,
passed down. Mm-hmm.
or they grew up in a very violent community and they're in survival mode. And this is the only way they know how to handle conflict. So those are some factors that we look at. But yeah, it's funny. I just wrote an abstract today for a conference on understanding that domestic violence is not caused by mental illness. It's a myth.
Wow. Okay. So what do people misunderstand about domestic violence?
Okay. So I think one thing they don't understand how there's a correlation with so many other crimes with domestic violence. For example, most people think that it's a hit, kick, punch, or slap, but they also need to understand that one of the ways that women are controlled is that they are raped, they are sexually assaulted, and that is another form of battery. But when 88% of our police officers in this nation are men, I need men to be comfortable asking women, who are the vast majority of our victims of rape and sexual assault. I need them comfortable asking them about those offenses. If they don't, there's one more level where the batterer will never be held accountable. I think another myth that people have is that they think that this is a lower economic, sometimes even people think it's a minority issue, and nothing could be further from the truth. I will tell you that I've responded to affluent communities, but the vast majority of our calls for service are people who rely on the police because they don't have the ability to go to the Hampton Inn for the night. They don't have the ability to call their friend who's a doctor to get their stitches, that they need. They don't have those resources. They don't have even maybe a vehicle. So they call the police. And so people are like, well, it's only those people. And the fact is, look at me. Do I look like a survivor of domestic violence? People would never guess it if I didn't disclose it, especially because I'm a former police officer. And my abuser was an officer. And people will ask me, well, was he a drunk? He rarely drank. Did he use substances? Never. He just had a volatile temper and he used violence against the people that he loved. And not just in my relationship, but with other women as well. So those are some myths right there that I like to squash immediately, that this happens in all communities. As a matter of fact, we have some research that tells us there are professions in which batterers are most attracted to because they want to have power and control over the other.
And what are they?
Law enforcement, military, and clergy.
Okay.
Oh, guys,
And
there's a whole nother topic of discussion.
yeah, girl, because my grandfather was a pastor
Uh-huh.
for 70 years,
Yeah.
and I
So
saw a lot.
they think they have the power, the higher power, right? And they use scripture sometimes to keep
Mm-hmm,
victims
mm-hmm,
within that relationship. I can
mm-hmm.
hear my father saying, "You were born of man's rib."
Oh,
That doesn't
wow.
mean that I have to abide by the rules set by that man.
That's heavy, girl. That's heavy. I like this what we're talking about. So why should everyone read this book, not just men?
Because this is a societal issue and we need people to understand a lot of these things that we've already talked about, those myths and prejudices. And I need them to know what the real data is, what's really happening in our nation. I need them to know about simple things they can do. We're not asking people who are witnessing it to put themselves in harm's way. We're asking them to be a good witness, to call 911, to take a picture, to videotape it if they can safely, to call it out. I mean, like, stop, you know, to make sure that they are doing something to intervene. And there's a wide variety of ways to do that. But I would also say that, we've got to talk about how we raise our children and how we talk about these issues. Kids today, they're dating at a much younger age than when we grew up. And the way they date is different as well. Even, I mean, holding hands used to be what we call first base. Now, first base is taking a picture of parts of your nude body and sending that to the other person. That's first base. Like, I like you, so let me send you a picture of my breast. And I've worked those investigations as young as fourth grade. That's not respectful behavior. And, electronics play a big part in it. But I will also say, with all the electronics and technology that we have, every single one that comes out, I say, how is an abuser going to use this to stalk their victim? And that's one more thing that we have to talk about with our youth is, Life 360 and all these other apps that where somebody is 24/7. That is not a healthy boundary. Trust is part of a healthy relationship. If you don't trust that person well enough that you can't lose sight of where they are on an app, that's a problem. That's a red flag right there. And so that's part of the reason that we want to make sure that we're educating people about this, that we're having these tough conversations. This is not stuff that our kids should be learning at school. They should be learning it from their parents, their guardians, and having conversations about this at home so that they know when they're out in society what boundaries are expected in a healthy relationship.
So, Dottie, if you have a father who is abusive and a mother who is being abused, how are you going to have these conversations with your kids?
Yeah, so that's where we need people astute enough to see. People will say to me, because working in the school system, I would have parents say to me, or not parents, but staff members, like, why is this kid so bad? Why is this kid acting this way? And my response always was, well, what has happened to this child? What are they witnessing at home or in society that is causing them to be in a fight flight mode? Once we understand that, then we can start to talk about that learned behavior. And if it's happening in their home, you're right. It's going to take somebody at the school. It's going to take a youth pastor. It's going to take somebody who is a protective factor, because our research says it only takes one caring adult to come alongside a child who is in a household with violence to change that child's trajectory. One caring adult who says, we don't hit people we love. We don't put hands on people because we're angry at them. We don't call people out and call them 80 million filthy names and think that is acceptable. That's disrespectful. And so we have to teach them what a healthy relationship looks like. We have to model that for them. And we have to tell them that we love them, and that because they grew up that way doesn't mean that they have to continue that in the next generation. I mean, we've seen the movie about breaking the cycle. It ends with us. And that's really what I did in my household. That's my best legacy, Dr. King, is that I can say that I have a child who is in a healthy relationship, who knows how to parent, who doesn't put hands on her stepson, and her husband don't put hands on each other and don't yell and scream at each other in front of their son, because that is not healthy. And when you can say that you don't have to continue that cycle one generation after the other, that's when you know that you're making a difference.
So, I guess you know that I was going into the schools and helping with the kids who are reading. Um, and I mean, I could pick up some things from the kids, but as far as the teachers, I mean, if they're doing like 30 students, when do they have time to take one? And it's just impossible with the workload that they have now.
I agree. Some of our classrooms are so large and they don't have a teacher's aide or a student assistant or anybody in there to assist with that. That doesn't mean that you're still not watching cues and that you can't connect that student. We have a really great program here, and it's across the nation. It's called Handle with Care. And Handle with Care is when a police officer goes to a home and works a domestic violence investigation. I'm just going to use that as an example, but there's other cases too. And there are children present there. They identify that child, what school they go to, and then they notify that school, handle this child with care tomorrow because the police were in their home last night. The child didn't get any sleep. Their parent was arrested, whatever the situation may be, because that student is likely to be sleeping, may be disruptive, tardy. There could be so many things that could happen because of what they experienced. And so that program is kind of like identifying these kiddos. If you've ever looked at the ACE score, the adverse childhood experience, kiddos who are raised in households where there's violence, like it depends. I could be a 7 or an 8, depending on how I define some of the questions on that ACE score. But if you have that type of score, you're walking with a lot of trauma, a lot of baggage. And honestly, our staff members are not exempt from that as well.
That is a fact.
Yep.
So why is domestic violence not just a women's issue?
Because the vast majority of our perpetrators, 85% of our perpetrators of domestic violence are men. And so we have to get to the root cause. We can't put the onus, the responsibility for stopping the violence on the victim because they're not controlling the violence. We have got to hold the offender accountable. And if men are the perpetrators of vast majority of these cases, then we've got to understand that behavior. And when I talked about accountability, that means that the courts have got to intervene. We know there's a connection with drug and alcohol use. About 50% of our homes have substance use issues or alcohol issues in those homes. It's what I call a mitigating factor for sentencing. We don't say, oh, you were drunk, we give you a pass because you punched your wife in the mouth because you were drunk. No, we say, okay, so you also have an issue, not only with violence, but also with drugs and alcohol. So we will get you treatment for that as well. And the courts have to have some oversight. And then we also have to have programming. If we want them to change the way they act, they have to understand why they perform in that way. Why do they act in that way? So we have batterers treatment programs across the state, across the nation. And it's not, can I say this? It is not anger management class. This is not about being angry. You get angry, I get angry. I'm assuming you do. Maybe you don't, Dr. King.
Yeah, don't assume that.
I get angry, but I know not to put my hands on somebody that I love. It's just not even in my thought process to hurt him, to strike him because he doesn't do what I want him to do when I ask for it. So we have to send them through batterers treatment program or intervention programs so that they understand why they act that way and that they can change if they choose to do so. And the courts can actually have oversight on their cases until they complete that program.
Okay, I'm gonna get political on you because I say whatever I want to say. This is my show. If they want
Okay.
to turn it off, they can turn it off. So my cousin is on, Alexandria. Hey, cuz she's watching. Caricia Simpson is also another faithful follower. Mr. Muhammad, thank you so much for joining. Please share the broadcast. This is really a great topic. So with ICE.
Mm.
So you're dealing with abuse anyway, and now you're dealing with ICE, and you're dealing with Epstein file. I mean, it's a lot of stuff going on in
Mhm.
the midst of the domestic violence. What,
Right.
Dottie?
Well, I will say that the environment for talking about this, and I'm just going to bring up DEI because a lot of the training that we were doing around the country, this is a gender-based topic. I can't talk about domestic violence unless I talk about gender. I'm sorry, but we have to talk about who's perpetrating and who are the victims predominantly. And a lot of our funding got cut because they didn't want us to talk about gender in this. How do I talk about reality? How do I talk about affecting change if we don't call it out and name what it is? And so it has been a really tough environment for us to be able to continue to do the training we need to do. We've had to talk about it like almost masked. Like
Yeah.
I can talk about like, okay, yes, women hit too. Okay, there is some research that women put hands on, but almost always it's defensive. Are there exceptions? Yes, there are exceptions to the rule, but the vast majority of our perpetrators are men. Now, same-sex relationships, our data suggests that in the general population, about 16 to 19% of people perpetrate domestic violence in their homes. And it's about the same with gay and lesbian couples. It may be a little bit higher in lesbian couples in some research that you look at. So I'm not saying that women don't hit, but I can tell you this factually from my own experience, because of our upper body strength, because of physiology, because of training and socialization, girls have been taught that it's not ladylike to hit, right? We've been taught that. We've been taught that we don't mouth off. We don't. And if you do, you're part of the problem.
I didn't get that memo.
I
No.
did. And also, women have a tendency to strike in this fashion in an open hand slap. Men don't do that. Men
They
strike with
punch.
a closed fist with upper body strength and mass behind that. And so, who's more likely to leave injury? I mean, come on, who's more likely to leave injury? And then the other thing that we know is every year in the United States, about 1,900 women are being murdered by their male intimate partner. The opposite is not true. Women rarely, yes, we have the data behind it, but I'll just tell you here in the state of Indiana, we see some outliers every year, but the vast majority of our homicides are perpetrated by men with firearms in our state. And so women generally don't have access to or knowledge of the firearms in the home. I was an exception to the rule because of my occupation and being raised in a household with a father who was a gunsmith. But that's an outlier. Most women, if I handed them a semi-automatic weapon, wouldn't know how to press check that weapon, wouldn't know how to drop the magazine. And so those are all factors that drive our homicide rate. And we got to talk about it. Some people are like, well, you can't talk about guns in this room. And I'm like, I have to. How do I talk about domestic violence and not talk about the presence of firearms in the home? Especially in this state. Our numbers are through the roof when it comes to homicides by firearms in domestic violence households. So can you tell that I'm passionate about this?
No. Well, it needs to be said. And so, why has well, you've really already talked about that. Why it's continued to grow. So how does the book guide people to be advocates without risking themselves?
One, to become knowledgeable, to get some training, read, question. Here's one of the things I love to question right now. I think chiefs and sheriffs want to ban me from coming to their agencies sometimes, but major cities across the United States are touting that there's been a reduction in violent crime in their cities. You've probably seen it. It's been in lots of major cities, but you know what they're not telling you? Is that there has not been a reduction in domestic violence homicides. They've gone
Mm,
up. And so while overall crime, violent crime is down, domestic violence homicides are not down. And so we're basically like, look over here, not over here. No, I want to know the whole story. I want to know all your data. And we know that if we train our police officers to use danger assessments or lethality assessments, we can predict. Evidence-based tools tell us if this victim is likely to be murdered in the future. We can do that long before the homicide if we just provide the training to our law enforcement officers. Dr. Jacqueline Campbell, Johns Hopkins University, spent 30 some years researching domestic violence homicides across our country and came up with 11 questions we can ask on the scene to determine whether or not this victim is likely to be murdered, and then immediately connect them to resources, an advocate on the telephone, not go to shelter. They don't have to go to shelter. They can get with an advocate on the telephone and we can start safety planning. And that's how we reduce our homicides. So it's getting educated, it's getting training, and it's speaking up. You know, I had bookmarks created for the book as well. And on the bookmark, on the back of it, I write every one of them, I autograph, and it says, "Your voice matters." Your voice. It only takes one person standing up and saying, "That's not okay. That's not acceptable. Tell me about that data. Why do you know that to be true?" And questioning the way we have done things forever and pushing back when we see laws that are trying to be passed, advocating for survivors, advocating for more resources. That's what we can do. It only takes one person. It's just like I told you before we started that I don't know a person who is very connected here in the community, who's very politically connected, who's in charge. But guess what? I sent an email saying I would love 30 minutes of your time to talk to you about lethality assessments, to talk to you about crisis intervention, because those are two evidence-based programs that we know help our communities. And that's all it takes is somebody being bold. Use your voice. One person. That's all.
I get it. I get it, Dottie. And, my biggest concern is, men have this macho thing. I'm not going to speak up because I'm a man and it's going to make me look weak and da da da. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, vulnerability is sexy. I'm sorry, but it's okay to be, you will say it, the odd man out. Like, be the one who says, "That's not acceptable." Or be the one that says, "You know what? We're making decisions about women at this table and we don't have any women here at this table." And we have to say, are we being inclusive in who is making this decision? I love quoting Shirley Chisholm. You probably know who she is,
Of
right?
course.
Of course you do. Shirley Chisholm said this: "If they won't give you a seat at the table, you bring your own chair." And that's me. I'm going to bring my own chair. I've been told many times that, "Oh, we don't need you here at the meeting." Oh, wait a minute. I thought this was an open meeting. I thought I had rank. I thought that I was supposed to be included at this table. Well, they oftentimes didn't want me there because I'm going to push back. I'm going to say, "Okay, we've done that for a long time, but it doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's the best practice in today's day and age." And that's what I need, is people understanding their voice needs to be heard. Yes, you can be respectful. We don't have to shout people down. It's okay to have a difference of opinion. But when you come to the table with facts and figures, it's a little hard to get a lot of pushback when you've got the data there and you know what you're talking about.
Why would people want to get this book, Dottie?
I think it's the timing is right, number one, to talk about an issue that is affecting our entire country. With the homicide rate that we see, with the number of children. And here's the other thing, we talk about unhoused individuals. About 30% of people who are unhoused are victims of domestic violence, and their children who fled and have no place to go and are living in their car or out on the street. So there's another tie-in to what is happening. The other thing is, this is a hard topic to tackle, and I think it's going to shed a lot of light on our things that are happening behind closed doors and how people turn a blind eye to it, and what we can do when we see it, what we can do to start the conversation, and what we can do to change the culture in our communities, and how we accept this as just the norm, that this is just what happens within families. I'm hopeful that we have that 75% of good men who recognize that, hey, I don't put my hands on my intimate partner. I am respectful. I want you to be proud of that and say, I am that guy and I'm going to affect change. And they can do it just within their own block. They can do it within their own neighborhood. They can do it within their own workplace. There's so many avenues at which they could affect change. What if it's your church? You could do it within your church. Oh, they're asking Crystal Lewis, thank you. Let me put the book up here for you. The book is called Strangled, A Survivor's Plea to Men Who Look the Other Way. And
And she is the author.
I am the author, and my co-author is Kathy Curtis. We hope that you will pick up the book. You can find it on Amazon. It is currently available audio. And just for everyone on the call, the book was recorded by me in a studio. So you're going to hear my voice in the reading of the book. You'll hear the 5 profanities come out of my mouth that are in the book too. And then it's also available in ebook, a Kindle version, and then it will be available on paperback to be released on International Women's Day, which is March 8th.
And for those of you in Fort Wayne, you have a book signing tomorrow night, don't you?
Oh, it's a month from now. It's March 19th.
What do you have tomorrow night? Don't you have something?
Tomorrow I'm doing another podcast, but no.
Okay.
The book signing is at the YWCA out on West Washington Center Road.
And that's what, March 19th?
Yes, March 19th.
Okay. Okay. Great. And this has been really good because you already know, we've talked earlier that domestic violence is really near and dear to my heart, and being that I have a nonprofit that supports, one of the things when I put my nonprofit together, that in my research, I found that for the military, a lot of Black women join the military not because they want to serve their country, because they don't have an alternative, right? So what happens is they go in and they don't take advantage of any opportunities. They're sexually abused,
Yes, ma'am.
and then they come out and they end up homeless, on drugs, because of that experience. That's a fact.
So I am partnering with an organization here in town called FW22, and it is a military focused group, and we are working with our military branches here in the United States to talk about domestic violence and sexual assault in the ranks, to have those tough conversations, because we know it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
We know that women join the military just like they do law enforcement, because it's one of the few occupations where you make equal pay for equal work. Although advancement within both of those are limited still for women, both in the military and policing. Again, a cultural issue that we need to address. But if we don't talk about the victimization that is happening within our military, you're absolutely right. That number 22 was the number of military members that were dying by suicide each month here in the United States. And so I'm doing a podcast with FW22 on Friday to address this very issue.
I thank you so much for all that you're doing. You're very brave. I would say that it's even a little scary what you're doing, in my opinion, because it is not going to be well received by everybody.
And you know what? I've always said this. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but I'm going to be like Eleanor Roosevelt. I'm going to keep steeping that tea bag because it makes me strong. And I have been blessed to surround myself with strong supporters like yourself. So I appreciate you, Dr. King. As soon as we met, we just clicked.
We did.
And it was like, you're my people. And that's what I'm doing right now to make sure that I stay healthy, to make sure that I have a strong support system and people who are willing to have these tough conversations. So I'm so appreciative of this opportunity and this platform.
You know what? You are amazing. I knew it from our first connection, and what you're doing is compared to nothing that anyone I know that is doing to get the word out. I mean, we've been saying break the silence, break. How long have we been using that thing, that slang, break the silence forever? So you, like you say, the onus is on the woman.
Mhm.
Uh, and you are changing that mindset.
I'm having tough conversations with people, and that's why when you do come to the book signing, I'm going to see you there. You'll see a lot of men there because I was very intentional in inviting men to the table, like George Hicks. He,
I know, George.
United Front. He's a good
Mhm.
man, and
He
he's
is.
one of the 75% good men. And I need George's voice. I need him talking with other men in the community that this is what a healthy relationship looks like, and that is not. And so he immediately said, I'll be there. And that's what I want. I want to create enough allies that there's more of us than there are of the abusers who are perpetrating this.
I love that. Please go out and get the book. Hold the book up again, Dottie.
Surely. And can we ask questions? See if people have any questions?
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, type them in the comments and we'll put them on the screen. Let me just type. Crystal says, we got you. What's the name of the book again?
Strangled, a survivor's plea to men who look the other way.
I'm typing it in now.
And if people, email me or reach out to me, I'll send them an autographed bookmark and they'll have it for their book if they're going to end up buying the paperback.
All right, say it again. Strangled, a survivor's what?
Plea, PLEA,
Got it.
to men who look the other way.
And it's on where?
Amazon. And it may show you right now that the book is temporarily out of stock. That is Amazon's way of saying it's in pre-order status until it's officially released on March 8th. But you can go ahead and order it and it'll be waiting for you on March 8th when they'll ship it. And if I will always offer this up if your community is looking for a speaker to come and talk about this subject, training on the topic, please let me know. I travel a lot and it would be my honor to come and work with your community to build collaboration, to have these tough conversations, to improve our systems. I haven't said it yet, but I will say it loudly. Sometimes our criminal justice system is broken, and sometimes it doesn't represent all people. And so I'm willing to have those tough conversations too about sometimes working and getting a protective order and filing a police report may not be the best option. And so one size does not fit all. And so I wanted to offer that up kind of like as a final word that I'm more than happy to have tough conversations.
Crystal said, no question, but agree with everything you all said. I'm going through it and divorcing my husband, who is a retired LTC U.S. Army. Good for you.
And Crystal, thank you so much for being vulnerable and offering that up for everyone. And just know that you can make it through this and that people love you and find that strong support system that can help you move to the next chapter.
Yes, and we thank everyone that tuned in. The good thing about the broadcast, you can share it For your friends who weren't here, we actually are live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook all at the same time. Please share this. Help us get this message out to our audience. I mean, we have 4 million followers on Facebook alone, and 300,000 on LinkedIn, and I don't even remember, a couple thousand on YouTube. There's We need you, okay? We need you to help us help others. So if you can do that, I would appreciate it. Dottie would appreciate it. And Dottie, thank you so much, and keep up the good work.
It's
Do you
my
have any
pleasure.
closing remarks that you want to share?
Honestly, just I hope that you will take it to heart in getting some education around this and use your voice to affect change in your communities. We can no longer turn a blind eye to this. We will never make our community safer unless we talk about domestic violence within our homes.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for tuning in. As always, you know I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Until our next broadcast, be safe and God bless.